Now, this is just the raw beginning of a walk cycle. There's a lot more keying that needs to be done on this to make it look halfway decent. And so we talked in a previous segment about walk cycles and the fact that we have the balance and counterbalance going on in the hip and the shoulder, as well as we have a bit of a rotation happening also when the walk is happening in both the hip and the shoulder, and of course secondary animation that's happening in the arms and lower arms and toes. There's all kinds of trailing animation that we need to do. But in order to speed this simple keyframe walk cycle for this first class, we're going to simply go ahead and show you how to quickly see your animation. There are a couple of different ways that you can do that. You can right click on the time slider itself, and there's an option called Play Blast. You click on the options. You can see here that you have options as far as quality goes, the format in which it can save, scaling, and some other options. So you can go ahead and Play Blast that. It'll calculate it for you. Bring up your Windows Media Player and you can see your animation. Now this has all of the other working frames in it, so it's not going to look like a cycle. So in order to get that to look more like a cycle, you can come right down here to your animation preferences and go ahead and put in frame 5 and 24. We don't want to say 25 because 5 is exactly the same position as 25. So if we put in 25, we would have a little bit of a glitch because it needs to play that same position twice. So in order to make it fluid, we take out one frame at the end so that the 25th frame is in fact the first frame, and then it plays over and over again. You'll have a smoother animation. So frame 5 is my first frame to frame 24, and I say OK. You can see my time slider has now changed. It has not cut off your work, it's simply hidden it. And so now you can go ahead and Play Blast that, and depending on your renderer or the speed of the calculations, you can see that it's more cycling now, but because it's playing over and over and there is a little bit of a delay, it will still look as though it's repeating that frame. So you can get a preview of your animation as it is in the Play Blast. The other option is if you come up here to Windows, Rendering Editors, Hardware Render Buffer, you can see that this will also render that for you. Let's see, go ahead and test render that, and it takes a couple of minutes to calculate it. Hardware rendering does calculate much faster than software rendering though, so you can get a quick preview of your animation. Now this will save to your project, so you need to make sure that you set up your project correctly so that you can find your file. Now once it has rendered, it'll place it right here under Flipbooks. You can see by clicking on that your animation. Stiff, yes, first pass walk cycle, but you can see in this one it's playing it a little bit better, so you can see that there's not the glitch that was evident in the Play Blast. Now in order to actually render your walk cycle for your portfolio, and I recommend that you do that so that you have one example of your animation in there, even though it's not a complete model. And as you work forward in your program, you can then apply this skill to a finalized model when you get that far, and replace that then in your portfolio for your final portfolio review. Now, in order to render that, you come up here to the render options, and right here there's a little icon called batch render. Export the current scene to the file, and again, depending on where you've set that, it will render that for you. Rendering with Maya hardware. You can see it's telling you what it's done, and it'll also tell you where it sent it. And once you have that rendered out, here also are examples of the Play Blast. So you can, this one is a little further along. You can see that I've thrown in some secondary motion in the hands and the shoulders and so forth, toes, to get them seated on the ground a little bit better. But this is an example of the Play Blast that you can also render for your portfolio in the meantime. And I look forward to seeing your final presentations. Here he is. I realized that you can see him play out in the other player. So here you can see a little bit of secondary animation. It's exaggerated so that you can see it a little bit better on this small recording.